The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wide like a vast bowl. 12 different alien species sat in their designated areas, each group looking very different from the others. Some had crystal bodies that sparkled under the lights. Others looked like walking plants with green skin and leaf-like hair. A few resembled giant insects with many eyes and clicking sounds coming from their mouths. Lisa Carter stood in the center of the chamber. She wore her best diplomatic uniform, dark blue with small earth symbols on the shoulders. Her brown hair was pulled back neatly, and her green eyes looked calm despite the fear she felt inside. She had practiced this speech many times on the long journey here. "Honored members of the council," Lisa began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I come before you today to ask for the release of my husband, Jake Carter. He has been imprisoned on Cathara Prime for 3 months now. The charges against him are false." A sound filled the chamber that made Lisa's skin crawl. It was laughter, but not human laughter. The crystalline beings called Zephyrians made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The plant-like Verdians rustled their leaves in what passed for their version of amusement. Even the insect-like Chitauri clicked their mandibles in a rhythm that meant they found something funny. High Magistrate Veltar stood up from the Zephyrian section. His body looked like a walking diamond, with light bouncing off his surface in rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice sounded like music played on glass instruments. "Ambassador Carter," Veltar said, and the way he said her name made it sound like a joke. "Your husband was caught stealing sacred crystals from our mining facility on Tertius 7. The evidence against him is clear. Security recordings show him taking the crystals and hiding them in his equipment." "Those recordings were altered," Lisa said firmly. "Jake is an honest man. He would never steal anything, especially not from his workplace. He was framed by someone who wanted to cause trouble between our species." More laughter filled the chamber. This time, other species joined in. The logical Andromedans, who looked like tall humans with silver skin and no hair, made a sound like computer processors humming with amusement. The collective-minded Hivari, who appeared as groups of small gray beings that moved together like a single organism, whispered among themselves in a way that sounded like giggling. "Ambassador," said Council Speaker Zarn, an Andromedan who led the sessions. "You speak of your husband as if his individual worth matters to the greater universe. This is a very primitive way of thinking." Lisa felt her hands clench into fists at her sides, but she kept her voice steady. "Jake matters to me. He matters to his friends and family on Earth. He matters to the people who work with him and respect him. Individual lives have value." "Value?" Feltar's crystalline form seemed to pulse with brighter light. "You speak of emotional attachment as if it were logical. What you call love is simply a chemical reaction in your brain. It makes your species weak and foolish." The chamber erupted, in more laughter. Lisa heard the Chitauri's clicking grow louder and faster. She saw the Verdians' leaves shake so hard that some fell to the floor. Even the emotionless Vex, who looked like walking metal statues, made a sound like machinery, grinding in what might have been their version of amusement. "Your husband broke our laws," Veltar continued. "The penalty for stealing sacred crystals is life imprisonment. This is justice according to Zephyrian law, which your own Earth government agreed to respect when you signed the trade agreements." "But the evidence is false," Lisa said again. "If you would just look at the technical analysis we provided, you would see that the recordings were changed. The timestamps don't match, the lighting is wrong. Someone with advanced technology created fake evidence." "Even if this were true," said another voice, this one belonging to a Hivari speaker, "why should the imprisonment of one individual concern us? There are billions of humans. Surely the loss of one is insignificant." Lisa took a deep breath. She had hoped it would not come to this, but she could see that reason and evidence would not work with these beings. They truly did not understand what humans would do for love. "You are making a mistake," she said quietly. "You think that because you don't understand human emotions, they don't have power. You think that because your species don't value individual bonds, we won't fight for them." "Fight?" Veltar's light grew even brighter and his voice took on a tone of even greater amusement. You would risk war between species over one person? This proves our point about human irrationality. The other council members nodded or made their species-equivalent gestures of agreement. They began to speak among themselves about how primitive humans were. Lisa heard words like barbaric and emotional and unstable floating through the air in different alien languages. I am giving you one final chance, Lisa said, raising her voice to be heard over their chatter. Release my husband. Admit that the charges were false. Make this right, and there will be no problems between us. The chamber fell quiet for a moment. Then Veltar began to laugh again, and soon all the others joined him. The sound was so loud that Lisa had to resist the urge to cover her ears. Ambassador Carter, Veltar said when the laughter died down, you have amused us greatly today. No rational species would risk interstellar conflict over biological urges. Your husband will remain on Cathara Prime for the rest of his natural life. You have 72 hours to leave Zephyrian space. If you return, you will be arrested as well. Lisa looked around the chamber one last time. She saw the smugness in their alien faces, the certainty that they understood everything about the universe. They thought emotions made humans weak. They thought love was just chemistry with no real power. You underestimate what love can drive a human to do, Lisa said quietly. Her voice was so calm that it made several of the alien representatives stop their chattering and look at her more carefully. We have made our decision, Veltar said. This council session is ended. As Lisa walked out of the chamber, she heard them still laughing behind her. They thought they had won. They thought they had shown a primitive human species its place in the galaxy. They had no idea what they had just started. Lisa smiled for the first time since arriving at the council station. They would learn. She would make sure of that. Lisa's ship docked at Luna Station 3 days after leaving the Galactic Council. The moon-based facility buzzed with activity as usual, with cargo ships and passenger transports coming and going every few minutes. But Lisa barely noticed the normal chaos around her. Her mind was focused on one thing: getting Jake back. She walked through the corridors with quick, determined steps. Other humans she passed looked at her with sympathy. Word had already spread about what happened at the council. Everyone knew that the aliens had laughed at her and refused to help. Many people stopped her to offer support, but Lisa just nodded politely and kept walking. Commander Amy Rodriguez was waiting for Lisa in the military section of the station. Amy had been Lisa's friend since their academy days, and she could read Lisa's moods better than anyone. When she saw Lisa's face, Amy felt a chill run down her spine. Lisa, Amy said carefully, I heard about the council meeting. I'm sorry they wouldn't listen to reason. Reason? Lisa sat down across from Amy's desk. They don't understand reason when it comes to human emotions. They think love is weakness. They're going to learn differently. Amy leaned forward. She had seen Lisa angry before, but this was different. This was cold and calculating, like ice that could cut through steel. What are you planning? I need access to classified military files, Lisa said without hesitation. Everything we have on Zephyrian technology, their defense systems, and the layout of Cathara Prime. Lisa, you can't be serious. You're talking about attacking a Zephyrian facility. That could start a war. Lisa's green eyes met Amy's brown ones. They started this when they imprisoned an innocent man and laughed at his wife for loving him. Amy was quiet for a long moment. She had known Lisa for 15 years. She had never seen her friend willing to risk everything for anything. But she also knew that Lisa and Jake had one of the strongest marriages she had ever witnessed. Their love was the kind that made other people believe in romance. If I give you these files, Amy said slowly, I could lose my commission. I could go to prison. I know, Lisa said. I won't ask you to do anything that could hurt your career. Amy looked at her friend for another long moment. Then she reached into her desk and pulled out a data pad. I'm going to take a coffee break. When I come back, I expect this pad to be exactly where I left it. After Amy left, Lisa quickly copied everything she needed. Information about Zephyrian weapons, ship designs, and most importantly, Detailed scans of Cathera Prime. The prison moon was smaller than Earth's moon but much denser. It orbited a massive gas giant in a delicate gravitational dance. Lisa's next stop was the research levels of Luna Station. Dr. Kevin Murphy worked in a lab that most people avoided because of the strange noises and occasional small explosions that came from inside. Kevin was brilliant but dangerous, the kind of scientist who built things that probably should not exist. Lisa found Kevin hunched over a workbench, fiddling with a device that hummed with energy and glowed blue around the edges. His red hair was messy and his lab coat had several burn marks on it. "Lisa," Kevin looked up with genuine pleasure. "I heard about Jake. I'm sorry those crystal jerks wouldn't listen." "I need your help, Kevin," Lisa said. "I need something that can affect gravitational fields on a planetary scale." Kevin's eyes widened. He set down his tools and looked at her carefully. "Gravitational manipulation on that scale? Lisa, are you talking about weapons?" "I'm talking about rescue," she said firmly. "Jake is on a moon. If that moon had problems with its orbit, there might be chaos. During chaos, prisoners might escape." Kevin was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I've been working on some theoretical devices, gravitational disruptors that could destabilize orbital mechanics. But Lisa, if something went wrong, you could destroy the entire moon. Would it work?" "Theoretically, yes, but the power requirements would be enormous. You'd need to place the devices directly in the moon's core. And if you miscalculated even slightly..." "Would it work?" Lisa asked again. Kevin looked into her eyes and saw the same determination that Amy had seen. "Yes," he said quietly. "It would work." Lisa's final stop was the civilian docks, where she found Captain Steve Williams loading supplies onto his ship. Steve was a former Earth Defense Force officer who had turned to private security work after the war with the Centauri pirates. His crew was small but loyal, and they specialized in jobs that required courage more than good sense. Steve was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of dangerous work. When he saw Lisa approaching, he straightened up and gave her a respectful nod. "Ambassador Carter," Steve said. "I heard about your husband. Shame what those aliens did." "I need a crew, Steve," Lisa said. "People who aren't afraid of long odds and dangerous work." Steve studied her face. "How dangerous?" "The kind where we might not come back." Steve was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting for a fight worth having. "Ma'am," he said, "my crew and I have been pretty bored lately. When do we leave?" Word spread quickly through the human colonies. The story of Jake's imprisonment and the Council's mockery became news on every human world. People were angry. They felt that the aliens had insulted not just Lisa and Jake, but all of humanity. Volunteers began to arrive at Luna Station. Maria Santos, an engineer who had worked with Jake on mining projects. Tony Blake, a pilot who owed Jake his life after a shuttle accident. Greg Adams and Helen Price, former soldiers who had served with Steve. Rick Jones and Carol Davis, traders who knew the shipping lanes between human and alien space. Within a week, Lisa had nearly 200 volunteers. They came from all walks of life, but they all shared one thing. They understood that love was worth fighting for. They had seen what Jake and Lisa meant to each other, or they had loves of their own that they would die to protect. The Zephyrians intercepted some of the human communications. They found the whole situation even more amusing than before. High Magistrate Veltar made public broadcasts, mocking the humans for their emotional response. He called them primitive creatures who mistake chemical reactions for meaningful bonds. The other alien species watched with interest. Some were curious about what the humans would do. Others placed bets on how quickly the human anger would fade. None of them took the threat seriously. Lisa worked 18 hours a day planning and preparing. She studied the layouts Kevin had provided. She memorized the patrol schedules Amy had given her. She coordinated with Steve to modify civilian ships for combat. Late one night, as she sat alone in her quarters looking at a picture of Jake, Amy found her. "Lisa," Amy said gently, "you know this is crazy, right? Even if you succeed in rescuing Jake, Earth will have to deal with the political consequences. The other species might turn against us. Lisa looked up from the picture. Amy, do you remember when we were at the academy and you told me about your sister? Amy nodded. Her sister had died in a transport accident when they were both young. You said you would have done anything to save her. Anything at all. That you would have fought the entire universe if it would have brought her back. I remember, Amy said quietly. This is my chance, Lisa said. This is my chance to fight the universe for the person I love. I won't waste it. Amy looked at her friend and realized that nothing she could say would change Lisa's mind. Then I guess we better make sure you win. 2 weeks later, Lisa's fleet hung in space at the edge of Zephyrian territory. 20 ships of various sizes floated in formation, their hulls modified with armor plating and weapon systems that Steve's people had installed. They looked like a ragtag group compared to military vessels, but every person aboard was there by choice, ready to risk everything for love. Lisa stood on the bridge of her command ship, looking out at the stars that marked the boundary of alien space. In a few hours, they would either rescue Jake or die trying. She felt strangely calm about both possibilities. Ambassador, came a voice from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian Authority. It's High, Magistrate Veltar. Lisa nodded. Put him on screen. The crystalline form of Veltar appeared on the main viewer. His diamond-like body sparkled with what Lisa had learned to recognize as amusement. Behind him, she could see other Zephyrian officials and representatives from several alien species. They were all watching, waiting to see what the primitive humans would do. Ambassador Carter, Veltar said, his musical voice carrying easily across space. How delightful to see you again. We understand you have brought some friends to visit our space. I've come to make one final offer, Lisa said clearly. Release my husband and admit that the charges against him were false. In exchange, Earth will offer favorable trade agreements and technological sharing that will benefit both our species. The sound that came through the speakers was like a crystal chandelier falling downstairs. Veltar was laughing so hard that his entire body flashed with brilliant light. Lisa could hear other voices joining in from the background. Oh, Ambassador, Veltar said when he could speak again. You continue to amuse us. You have brought 20 small ships against the might of the Zephyrian Defense Force. You have perhaps 200 humans against our thousands, and you think this gives you bargaining power? I think you still don't understand what you're dealing with, Lisa said calmly. What we are dealing with, Veltar replied, is a species so controlled by primitive emotions that they cannot see logic. Your husband is guilty of theft. He will remain imprisoned. You and your little fleet will leave our space immediately, or you will be destroyed. Lisa looked around her bridge. She saw the faces of her crew, humans who had left their families and jobs to follow her into danger. Maria Santos sat at the engineering station, her dark eyes hard with determination. Tony Blake manned the helm, his jaw set with resolve. Behind them, she could see Steve Williams checking weapon systems one more time. Magistrate, Lisa said, turning back to the screen. I want you to broadcast this conversation to every species in the galaxy. I want them all to hear what I'm about to tell you. By all means, Veltar said, clearly enjoying himself. Let the galaxy see human foolishness on display. Lisa took a deep breath. What she was about to say would change everything, not just for her and Jake, but for humanity's place in the universe. You called human love a chemical reaction. You said it makes us weak and primitive. You laughed at the idea that one person could matter so much that someone would risk everything to save them. Because it is laughable, Veltar interrupted. Individual attachment is meaningless in the grand scope of civilization. Then let me show you what meaningless looks like, Lisa said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made several alien observers stop laughing. Dr. Murphy, are the gravitational disruptors ready? Kevin's voice came over the comm from the science ship. Ready and armed, Lisa. But I have to say again, if we do this, there's no going back. The energy release will be massive. Gravitational disruptors? For the first time, Veltar sounded less amused and more curious. Lisa smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Cathara Prime is held in orbit by a delicate gravitational balance with its parent gas giant. My scientists have calculated that destabilizing that balance would cause the moon to tear itself apart. The debris field would be visible from halfway across the galaxy. The laughter stopped. Completely. Lisa could see Veltar's crystalline form dim as he processed what she had said. "You are bluffing," he said. But his voice had lost its musical confidence. "You would not destroy a moon. There are 50,000 prisoners of various species on Cathara Prime. There are 200,000 Zephyrian personnel. You would never commit such an act." "You're right," Lisa said. "A rational person wouldn't. But you keep telling me that humans aren't rational. You keep saying that our emotions make us do impossible things. So let me ask you, what do you think love will make me do?" The silence stretched across space. Lisa could see figures moving frantically in the background of the Zephyrian transmission. She heard voices speaking rapidly in alien languages. The other species representatives were no longer amused. They were beginning to realize that the humans might actually be serious. "You cannot be serious," came a new voice. An Andromedan official had stepped forward. The destruction of Cathara Prime would destabilize the entire star system. The economic losses alone would affect trade throughout this sector. "Then convince the Zephyrians to release my husband," Lisa said simply. "One man," said a Hivari representative, its gray form trembling with what might have been fear or anger. "You would cause system-wide destruction for one man?" Lisa felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Steve Williams standing beside her. Behind him, her crew had gathered. Maria, Tony, Rick, Carol, Greg, Helen, and dozens of others. They all looked at her with the same expression. Complete support. "Not just one man," Lisa said, turning back to the screen. "My man. The person I love more than anything in the universe. The person I promise to stand by no matter what. And you know what? Half my fleet has already left because they think this plan is too extreme. But 100 people stayed because they understand what I understand." "What is that?" Veltar asked quietly. "That love is not weakness. Love is the strongest force in the universe. It makes people do things that logic says are impossible. It makes them fight when they should surrender. It makes them sacrifice when they should be selfish, and sometimes it makes them destroy moons." Lisa gestured to her communications officer. "Send the final message to all human colonies. Tell them what we're about to do and why. Tell them that today, the galaxy learns what human love really means." She looked back at the screen where dozens of alien faces stared at her in growing horror. "You wanted to see what human love looks like when you push it too far. You laughed at our emotions and called them primitive. You imprisoned an innocent man and mocked his wife for trying to save him." Lisa's voice grew colder and more determined. "So watch carefully. You're about to get a lesson in human nature that the galaxy will never forget." The transmission ended as the Zephyrians cut the connection. But Lisa knew they were still watching, along with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. They were all waiting to see if the humans would really do it. "All ships," Lisa said into her comm, "this is it. Anyone who wants to leave can go now. No judgment, no shame. What we're about to do will make us heroes or monsters depending on who's telling the story." She waited. No ships left her formation. "Maria," Lisa said to her engineering officer, "signal the fleet. We're going in." The 20 human ships moved forward, crossing into Zephyrian space. Behind them, the galaxy watched and waited. Ahead of them, Cathara Prime spun in its ancient orbit, unaware that it had only hours left to exist. The Zephyrian defense fleet was waiting for them. 50 warships hung in perfect formation around Cathara Prime, their crystalline hulls gleaming with deadly beauty. Each ship was twice the size of Lisa's largest vessel, armed with weapons that could cut through human armor like paper. Lisa watched the enemy formation from her bridge and felt no fear, only a cold determination that had been growing stronger every day since Jake's imprisonment. She opened a channel to her fleet. "This is it, people," she said calmly. Steve, take your combat group and keep those defense ships busy. Make them think we're here for a standard rescue operation. Kevin, you and I are taking the science ship down to the moon's surface. Lisa, came Steve's voice over the comm. There are 50 ships out there. My people are brave, but we can't hold them off for long. You don't have to win, Lisa replied. You just have to give us enough time to get to Jake and activate the disruptors. The battle began with a flash of energy, weapons lighting up the darkness of space. Lisa's converted civilian ships spread out and attacked from multiple directions, using their smaller size and better maneuverability to avoid the heavy weapons of the Zephyrian warships. Tony Blake pushed their science ship toward the moon's surface, while explosions bloomed around them. Behind them, Lisa watched Rick Jones's cargo hauler take a direct hit and explode in a ball of fire. She closed her eyes for a moment, knowing that 3 good people had just died because of her decision. Lisa, Kevin said from his seat at the scientific instruments. I'm reading massive energy buildups from the Zephyrian ships. They're bringing in reinforcements. How many? She asked. Another 30 ships, maybe more. And Lisa? Kevin's voice was grim. I'm detecting at least 100 civilian transports trying to evacuate the moon's personnel. Lisa felt a stab of something that might have been conscience. Hundreds of thousands of beings were about to die because she loved one man. But then she thought of Jake sitting in a prison cell, paying for a crime he did not commit while aliens laughed at the woman who loved him. Keep us on course, she said firmly. They landed on Cathara Prime's surface near the main prison complex. The moon's low gravity made movement easy, but the thin atmosphere required breathing gear. Lisa and Kevin suited up while Tony stayed with the ship, ready for a quick escape. The prison facility looked like a crystal palace, with towers and domes that reflected the light of the nearby gas giant. But Lisa knew it was really a fortress, designed to hold the most dangerous criminals in Zephyrian space. They fought their way through automated defense systems that fired energy beams and launched explosive drones. Kevin's scientific equipment helped them bypass electronic locks and security barriers. Lisa carried a human-made plasma rifle that cut through crystalline armor with satisfying efficiency. Jake's cell is in the central tower, Lisa said, checking the facility plans Amy had given her. The core access point is 1 level down. They moved through corridors filled with alien prisoners who watched them with curious eyes. Most had never seen humans before. Some called out in languages Lisa didn't understand, perhaps offering help or just commenting on the strange sight of 2 humans invading a Zephyrian prison. The sound of fighting echoed through the facility as prison guards tried to stop them. Lisa and Kevin moved with desperate efficiency, knowing that every minute they delayed meant another human ship dying in the battle above. They reached Jake's cell block and found it heavily guarded. A dozen Zephyrian soldiers waited for them, their crystalline bodies glowing with stored energy that they could release as deadly weapons. Lisa and Kevin took cover behind a corner and prepared for what might be their final fight. Kevin, Lisa said, can you get to the core access while I handle the guards? That's suicide, Lisa. There are too many of them. Maybe. But if I don't try, Jake dies anyway. And so does everyone else when this moon tears apart. Lisa was about to charge into the corridor when she heard a familiar voice calling her name. She looked up and saw Jake standing at the bars of his cell, his brown hair longer than she remembered, his face thin from months of prison food. Lisa, Jake shouted. What are you doing here? She had imagined this moment so many times, but now that it was happening, she could barely speak. Getting you out of here, she managed to say. The whole moon is shaking, Jake said. The guards are saying something about human ships attacking. Lisa, please tell me you didn't start a war over me. Lisa looked at her husband, the man she had loved for 10 years, the person she had crossed the galaxy to save. Not a war, she said. Something bigger. She turned back to Kevin. I'm going to run at them and draw their fire. When they're focused on me, you get to that core access and plant the disruptors. Lisa, no, Jake called from his cell. Whatever you're planning, it's not worth it. I'm not worth starting a war. Lisa looked at him through the bars. You're worth everything to me, she said simply. Then she stepped into the corridor and started shooting. The battle was brief but intense. Lisa's human weapons were less powerful than Zephyrian energy blasters, but she had something the guards didn't: the desperate courage of someone fighting for love. She moved and fired with reckless abandon, drawing the guards away from Kevin's position. Kevin reached the core access and began installing the gravitational disruptors. The devices were small but incredibly complex, designed to resonate with the moon's gravitational field and amplify tiny disturbances into massive instabilities. Zephyrian energy blast caught Lisa in the shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing into a wall. She looked up to see 3 guards advancing on her position, their weapons charging for killing shots. Then the wall beside them exploded outward. Jake Carter stepped through the hole, carrying a piece of heavy machinery he had somehow ripped from his cell wall. He brought it down on the first guard like a club, shattering the crystalline being into sparkling fragments. "Nobody shoots my wife," Jake said grimly, then turned to face the other guards. The reunion was everything Lisa had dreamed of and nothing like she had expected. Jake pulled her to her feet with one arm while firing a captured Zephyrian weapon with the other. They fought side by side, covering Kevin as he finished installing the disruptors. "Done!" Kevin shouted. "But we need to get out of here now. The gravitational cascade will begin in 5 minutes." They ran through shaking corridors as the moon's structure began to respond to the disruptors. Cracks appeared in walls as gravitational stress pulled at the moon's core. Other prisoners were being evacuated by guards who had suddenly realized that their impregnable prison was about to become a debris field. Tony had kept the ship ready for takeoff despite 3 different groups of guards trying to capture it. He saw Lisa, Jake, and Kevin running across the landing pad and fired up the engines. They barely made it off the surface before the real chaos began. Lisa watched through the ship's rear viewer as Cathara Prime started to come apart. The moon's surface cracked like an eggshell, with massive chunks of rock and metal spinning away into space. "Kevin," Jake said quietly, "please tell me there was another way." Kevin looked at the readings on his instruments. The gravitational cascade was beyond stopping now. "There was always another way," he said. "But it would have meant leaving you in that cell." Above them, the space battle was ending as both sides realized what was happening to the moon. Human and Zephyrian ships alike fled from the expanding field of debris. Lisa's fleet had lost 8 ships and 43 people, but the survivors were escaping. "Look," Lisa said, pointing out the main viewer. Cathara Prime was dying in the most spectacular way possible. The moon's core had become unstable, causing it to tear itself apart from the inside out. Massive chunks of rock, some as large as cities, spun away in all directions. The debris field would circle the gas giant for millions of years, a permanent monument to what human love could accomplish. Lisa held Jake close as they watched his former prison disappear forever. Around them, their small crew was quiet, awed by the magnitude of what they had just done. "How many?" Jake asked quietly. 250,000, Kevin said, reading evacuation reports. "Most of the prison personnel and prisoners got away in time, but not all." Jake closed his eyes. "People died because of me." "No," Lisa said firmly. "People died because the Zephyrians wouldn't listen to reason, because they thought love was weakness, because they laughed at the idea that one person could matter enough to fight for." She looked out at the expanding debris field that had once been a moon. "Now they know better." The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every civilized species knew what the humans had done. The destruction of Cathara Prime was visible from 3 star systems, a brilliant expanding ring of debris that caught and reflected the light of distant suns. Lisa and Jake sat together in their small quarters aboard the refugee ship that was carrying them to safety in the Outer Rim territories. They had barely spoken since escaping the moon's destruction. The weight of what they had accomplished and what it had cost lay heavy between them. "I keep thinking about the evacuation reports," Jake said quietly. 50,000 beings didn't make it off the moon in time. 50,000 people are dead because you came to rescue me." Lisa took his hand in hers. It was rougher than she remembered, scarred from months of prison work. They're dead because the Zephyrians chose to play games with human emotions. Because they thought love was something to be mocked. Was it worth it? Jake asked. Was I worth 50,000 lives? Lisa was quiet for a long time before answering. Ask me that question again in 50 years when we're old and gray and still together. Ask me when our children are grown and having children of their own. Ask me when the galaxy has learned to treat human bonds with respect instead of laughter. Meanwhile, in the great chambers of the Galactic Council, an emergency session was taking place. Representatives from every major species had gathered to discuss what they were already calling the Carter Incident. The mood in the chamber was very different from the last time Lisa had stood there. High Magistrate Veltar's crystalline form was dimmer than usual as he addressed the assembly. The humans have committed an act of terrorism unprecedented in galactic history. They destroyed an entire moon, killed thousands of beings, and destabilized an entire star system. Over one person, added Council Speaker Zarn, his Andromedan, features showing something that might have been confusion or fear. They risked interstellar war, committed mass murder, and created a permanent navigation hazard in a major shipping lane, all for one individual. The chamber buzzed with conversation, in dozens of different languages. The crystalline Zephyrians chimed anxiously among themselves. The plant-like Verdians rustled their leaves in agitation. Even the emotionless Vex were making mechanical sounds that indicated distress. The question before us, said a Hivari spokesperson, its gray form trembling slightly, is how to respond to a species that values individual emotional bonds over collective welfare. We could impose sanctions, suggested a Chitauri representative, its insect-like mandibles clicking thoughtfully. Cut off trade with human space until they agree to surrender the terrorists. To what end? Asked a new voice. Admiral Kex of the Hegemony Navy, a military alliance that had been observing the human expansion with interest, stepped forward. What we witnessed was not terrorism. It was a demonstration of tactical capability. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Kex was known throughout the galaxy as one of the finest military minds of his generation. When he spoke of tactical matters, other species listened. Consider the strategic implications, Kex continued. A force of 20 converted civilian vessels defeated a Zephyrian defense fleet and successfully executed a planetary-scale demolition mission. They did this not for territory, resources, or political advantage, but for one person. What does this tell us about human military potential? It tells us they're insane, Veltar said, his voice losing some of its musical quality. No, Kex replied calmly. It tells us they're unpredictable. Logic-based species make decisions based on cost-benefit analysis. We can predict their actions because we understand their motivations. But humans will take actions that seem completely irrational from our perspective, and they will succeed because we cannot predict what they will do. An uncomfortable silence settled over the chamber. Several representatives were quietly calculating what might happen if their species ever crossed humanity in the wrong way. Furthermore, Kex continued, they demonstrated loyalty bonds that extend beyond immediate family groups. 200 humans volunteered for a suicide mission to rescue someone they had never met, simply because he was married to one of their own. This kind of collective emotional response could make them extremely dangerous as enemies. In the days that followed, reaction to the Carter incident varied widely across the galaxy. Some species called for immediate military action against humanity. Others argued for diplomatic solutions, but many began to quietly reconsider their understanding of human nature. The logical Andromedans released a scientific paper analyzing human emotional responses as a military advantage. They noted that species which dismissed human feelings as weakness were vulnerable to miscalculating human actions. The collective-minded Hivari issued a statement acknowledging that individual-focused species like humans might pose unique strategic challenges. Their collective consciousness had trouble understanding how someone could value one person over thousands, but they recognized the power it gave human society. Even the emotionless Vex began to factor human irrationality parameters into their strategic planning algorithms. They could not understand love, but they could calculate its effects. Lisa and Jake found sanctuary on a human colony world called New Haven, far from the major shipping lanes. The local governor was sympathetic to their cause and refused to extradite them to face alien justice. Within weeks, they discovered they were not alone. Hundreds of humans began arriving on New Haven and similar worlds. Some were fleeing persecution from alien authorities who blamed all humans for the destruction of Cathera Prime. Others came because they wanted to be near the woman who had literally moved a moon for love. Lisa found herself becoming something she had never wanted to be. A symbol. Children were named after her. Couples getting married would invoke her example, promising to love each other with Carter devotion. Songs were written about the woman who shattered a moon for her husband. But the most significant change came from the Galactic Council itself. 6 months after the Carter incident, they quietly passed what became known as the Carter Protocols. These were diplomatic guidelines that acknowledged the unique nature of human emotional bonds and the extreme actions humans might take to protect them. The protocols established that disputes involving human family members should be handled with extra care. They recommended that alien courts consider human bonding factors when dealing with cases involving married humans or close family groups. Most importantly, they warned all species that mocking or dismissing human emotional attachments could lead to unpredictable and potentially catastrophic responses. High Magistrate Veltar personally delivered the new protocols to Earth's ambassador, a man named Peter Davis, who had replaced Lisa in her diplomatic role. The Zephyrian's crystalline form was noticeably dimmer as he spoke. These protocols represent the Council's recognition that different species have different values, Veltar said formally. While we do not understand human emotional attachments, we acknowledge their significance to human decision-making. Ambassador? Davis nodded politely. The protocols are acceptable to Earth. However, I should mention that Lisa and Jake Carter will never be surrendered to face alien justice. The human government considers them heroes, not criminals. Veltar was quiet for a moment. Perhaps, he said finally, we have different definitions of heroism as well. 5 years later, Lisa and Jake Carter were living a quiet life on New Haven. Jake worked as a mining consultant, helping new colonies establish their resource extraction operations. Lisa taught diplomacy at the local university, though her classes were more popular than any professor expected. They had 2 children now, a daughter named Hope and a son named Freedom. Sometimes on clear nights they would point out the constellation that had formed around the gas giant where Cathera Prime used to orbit. The debris field was still visible to the naked eye, a permanent reminder of what their love had cost. Do you ever regret it? Jake asked one evening as they sat on their porch watching the stars. Lisa looked at their children playing in the yard, then at her husband's face in the starlight. The people who died? Yes, I regret that every day. But rescuing you? Showing the galaxy that human love is not weakness? No, I don't regret that. She squeezed his hand. Besides, look around you. Look at how the other species treat us now. They don't laugh at human emotions anymore. They don't dismiss our bonds as primitive chemistry. They might not understand love, but they respect its power. Jake nodded, thinking of the reports that reached even their remote colony. Human diplomats were treated with new caution throughout the galaxy. Trade negotiations took into account the fact that humans might make decisions based on factors other than pure logic. Most importantly, no human had been imprisoned on false charges by any alien species since the Carter incident. The galaxy is learning, Lisa said softly. They're learning that love is not weakness, that emotional bonds can be stronger than steel and more devastating than weapons, that sometimes one person really can matter enough to move moons. She looked up at the stars, where the ring of debris around the distant gas giant caught the light like a wedding band made of broken stone. They laughed at human love, she said. Now they know better.